Oh, big baby. Hello there, you guys. I hope you're all doing well. Today, I wanted to do that Q&A that I asked you guys 4 questions for about a month ago, and then I did not get to. I underestimated packing, and so we're just gonna do it now. I picked about 20 questions. Patreon has question priority, and then I grabbed some from all the other ones. Altogether, there were nearly 400 questions, so I tried my best to pick ones that I think I get either asked a lot or are good questions that I think are an important thing to answer, I suppose. Okay, question number 1, shall we? Is it normal to feel sort of awkward/fake when performing, or at least trying to perform spells? Even the minor, easy, not that complicated ones. And what can I do to get rid of this feeling? Yes, it is super normal, and honestly, I still occasionally feel that way when I'm trying something out that's not really within my comfort zone. I think a lot of the time, especially when you're a beginner and just starting out, there's this pressure to do spells and practice magic in a very specific way, but really at the end of the day, that's not necessarily what's going to be most effective for you. Magic is only effective when you feel right and what you're doing is powerful. If you feel uncomfortable or like you're doing something wrong or just that you're feeling silly, it's not going to have enough power behind it to really influence anything. But it is very, very normal. I mean, often a lot of you who are beginners and just starting out are coming from backgrounds that just don't interact with witchcraft in any way. And the whole idea of magic and intent and things just are completely new and not on your radar at all. It is very, very normal, even when it comes to the not so complicated ones. Personally, for myself, what helped me get over that feeling was just finding the ways of working that really suit me. I am a little more folk-based, kitchen, herb-based, and I do a lot of work in that regard, and I don't really feel silly when I'm doing that, but more ceremonial magic doesn't really suit my personal style of craft, and I feel a little more uncomfortable and unsure of myself in those situations. So for me, it really took finding and feeling out all the different areas of magic and feeling which ones felt right to me. And then also just practicing and getting accustomed to it and not really putting too much pressure on myself to do everything right the first time. Because at the end of the day, you really do need to feel comfortable in what you're doing for it to be effective. But it's completely normal to feel a little off about it, or like you're not really doing this right, or it's too silly, and it just takes some practice and time to get comfortable. Think about the first time you ever tried anything new, maybe cooking or a sport. You feel a little goofy out on the field or not really sure of what you're doing, but once you practice a little bit, you get the hang of it and you are far more confident going forward. And that's kind of the same thing here. Practice makes perfect. What does magic feel like to you? I really loved this question, and I've been doing a lot of thinking about it. And I think the best way that I can describe it is that feeling you get when you're falling for somebody. And when you're close to them and you can feel their energy, their heat radiating off of them. You aren't even necessarily right up against them, but you can feel them. They're present if they're standing behind you or around you. Or when you see them walk into a room, that rush that you get through your whole body, or hearing them talk or touch you and the chills or anything. That's, I think, what magic feels like, at least to me. I cannot visualize, so it's very hard for me to put intention into my workings. Do you have any tips on how to go about putting intention in crafting things without visualizing? All right, I think this one is also a really, really good question. I think when you can't visualize, it needs to come more from what you're feeling. This is a question I get asked a lot, and I have never really been sure exactly how to answer it because it wasn't really on my radar. But after I got that last question about how magic feels, I kind of realized, without visualization, I don't visualize magic, I feel it. And in that regard, if you feel what you want to put forth or feel what you want to receive, I think that is a really good way to replace that visualization. Now, visualization is a very potent and important part of practice. So I do think that it is a lot harder for those of you that don't quite have the ability to visualize. Alternatively, you also could probably try to practice more with art magic and things that, perhaps it's not in your head, but you can put it out on paper or write it out in front of you. Write letters or drawings that express what you are wishing to achieve in spell work and incorporate that into your practice. What do you do with offerings if you leave them for a few days? What do you do with them after? So I get this question a lot, and this was one that I was really confused about when I first started practicing, and I'll probably make a video that details what to do with spells and the remaining ingredients and offerings. But what I do, and what I see a lot of people doing, is return them to nature. Now, there are a couple ways to do it, and it really does depend on how your offerings are going or what your spell work is. Sometimes it makes most sense to cast things into the wind, or to burn them, or to bury them, or send them away in water. It does really depend on what you're working towards or who you're working with, or, a variety of factors that I will touch on in the video that I would like to make. But simple baseline, return it to nature. And I would say do what feels right, or do some research into exactly what you're doing. I do think that my go-to tends to be burying. It is a pretty safe bet, and it works most of the time. I think mainly for spell work, the remainder of spells, that's the only time that I really shift to casting it off into the water or into the wind, or burning it. But for offerings, I do tend to just bury them and let them go back into the earth. Do you meditate? If yes, what are your tips for doing so successfully? I do meditate. It was something I got into kind of actually before I really got into witchcraft. I was using it more as a way to center myself. But I learned very slowly. I learned with the focusing on your breathing technique, where you focus solely on the sensation of breathing in and breathing out and breathing in and breathing out, and just fluctuating through that until you reach this state of deep peace and calm. And then once you're there, you kind of drift into that space of just watching things pass. But I think that when you're beginning, it's helpful to have just one thing to focus on. This could be counting backwards. It could be counting 1, 2, 1, 2. Just staying stuck on one thought until you are able to get to a place that is strong enough to just watch thoughts pass by, I think is really more useful. Also, there are a lot of benefits to meditating on one thing and trying to seek answers for one specific thought. But I struggled a lot with just getting to a state where I could just observe, and doing that practice of the breathing in and breathing out and focusing solely on the sensation of that really did help a lot in getting me focused and grounded into a place where I could do that. And now I can really sink into a meditative state very, very quickly, but it took a lot of practice and time. I'm at a point in my life where a lot of change is coming and some big decisions need to be made, which is both exciting and terrifying. Are there any daily routines, hobbies, or practices that you found help you to stay grounded during times of great change? Well, let me tell you, me too. And yes, a lot of the time, especially now, as pretty much my entire life has changed in every possible way for so much better than it was, but that wasn't English, but we're gonna let it slide. And while it was both exciting, it was very terrifying. And there were a couple things that I continued to help keep myself kind of grounded and sure of my situation throughout the day, but especially when I was busy though, there wasn't a lot I could do. So I guess my main two would be meditation. I really do recommend that. And I also really recommend just trying to spend some time grounding outside. I tried every day that I could, and I still do, to just spend some time outside with my feet bare against the earth, just observing and experiencing and feeling everything that there is to feel. It is so deeply calming, and it helps me to stay connected to my craft even on the days that I don't really have enough time to dedicate to it. So meditating and spending a moment in nature and feeling the earth are my two best daily routines. Do you see the production of your videos as an extension of your magical craft? Do you focus intention into them the same way that you would for a balm or tincture or foodstuffs that you make? Yes, I do. I really appreciated this question. It really meant a lot to see that, because I really do. I treat them like they're an extension of my craft, and in a way they kind of are. I have seen more growth in myself magically through making them, and I've learned a lot about myself with them as well. A lot of how my videos are made through feelings. I don't really know how to explain it, but I do feel a very deep spiritual connection to a lot of the videos I craft. Well, not necessarily one like this, but for my other channel, a lot of those do come from what my soul wants to create. And so yeah, I do. I really appreciate that question. How do you feel about marriage or having children? What hopes and wishes do you have? I get this question a lot, so I thought I would pop it in there. I would like someday to have children, and I would not be opposed to marriage. It's not on my radar currently, but it is something that I would like to have in my lifetime. Presently, I want to spend a lot of time exploring and finding myself and my life and learning about the earth and how different and beautiful it is everywhere. But I do intend on having children one day. Marriage, I mean, it's not exactly just my choice in that matter, but I'm not opposed to it. I do think those are wonderful, wonderful things, but I'm not quite there yet in my life. We'll get there though one day. Not for a while. I am not old enough for that. Although, well, I suppose technically I am, but I do not feel old enough for all that yet. Do you use tarot or other divination in your practice? Why or why not? If so, what deck or tools do you use? I do use divination in my practice. It is not the primary focus of my practice, but it is something that I like to fiddle with every now and again. I do use tarot for the most part. It is just what I have practiced the most, and I don't have my deck right here. I use the classic one that I cannot remember what it's called, the one that is the one that you think of. However, I have also begun studying runestones, and I do believe that I will be shifting more towards that way of divination in the future. How do you fight the common culture of witches not being real and keeping yourself motivated and optimistic about viewing yourself as / being a witch and furthering your craft? This was a really good question. I get this a lot, and I know from a lot of you that grew up in religious households or non-accepting households, or just households that are really not open to the idea of witchcraft or just spiritual things in general. This is a challenge. You know, I grew up believing in fairies for longer than most children. I was talking to trees for till into middle school, and then kind of got back to talking to trees in high school, so I didn't really take a break there. But for me, it was something that I kind of knew in my soul always, and it didn't really matter what other people had to say about it because it was real to me, and I knew it. But it can definitely feel a little bit hurtful when other people try to break it all down, and honestly, for the most part, I usually just laugh it off or ignore it. And I don't know if that's necessarily super effective, but it does get those that are judgmental off your back. But, I think at the end of the day, what's really important is that you trust yourself and do what feels true to you. And if you feel comfortable or right, or like what you're doing, it fits what you need to be doing, then you're golden. How has defining yourself as a witch publicly impacted your muggle life? Has anyone recognized you or searched up your videos? Well, nobody has recognized me yet. I don't know what I would do if that ever happened. But in general, it hasn't really changed my life all that much, just being defined as a witch publicly. It has gifted me a lot of opportunities in my life because this is my job, and that is such a cool job. It gives me a lot of freedom to be myself, and it has also really empowered me and made me feel far more confident in my craft and far more confident just as an individual in general. It hasn't really impacted my life negatively. If anything, it's been really positive and beautiful and incredibly helpful for my growth as a person. But I will say, being in a new place and trying to make new friends, I am very cautious about how much I disclose right away, which is something I've never really had to do before. So it is interesting, although I'm in Washington and there's a lot of witchy people out here, so I'm not that concerned. But I think that's a good question. I do think that I am the exception and not the rule. I know most people don't come from families that are as accepting or live in areas that are as free and allowing of these types of things. But I'm very fortunate, and it has really just positively impacted my life. Do you belong to a coven? No, I do not. I get asked this question a lot. I used to want to be. I don't really anymore. I prefer practicing solo. It's a lot easier. There are certain things that I would love to have a group of people to practice with, though. I do interact with more witchy people and other people of pagan things in the internet sphere, so I don't feel like I am a completely lone practitioner anymore, but I do not belong to a coven. I don't really think that it's absolutely necessary to belong to covens. It is absolutely useful and helpful, especially when you're beginning, and I think people that are drawn to communities would really benefit from it. But personally, I'm more of a loner type person, and I always have been, and my practice is very individual and unique to me. So it's I think easier when I just am a solitary person. What is your favorite way to connect to the energies of the earth? What makes you feel most grounded and in tune with nature? I love this. My favorite way to connect in the literal sense of going out and connecting and grounding is to go out in the transitional times, either early morning just before sunrise and existing and observing as the sun rises, or right at sunset and observing that transition. I honestly believe that feeling and existing within those energies, the transitional energies specifically, is what helps me to feel the most connected to the earth and my craft. My favorite times of year are the equinoxes because they are such pivotal transitional points. Transitions just for some reason feel so much more powerful and connecting to me. I think perhaps it's because there's a very clear change happening and it's easy to immerse yourself within it for an extended period of time. But I think just existing and observing during those times is my favorite way to connect with the energies of the earth. Alternatively, though, I would probably say crafting herbal cures if I need a physical activity to do to explain this. Going out and foraging and crafting something completely from scratch that I found myself does really help me to feel far more connected and in tune with the earth. So that is my alternative answer. Do you ever struggle with anxiety? And if so, do you use your craft to help manage? I do not anymore. I used to be a very, very anxious person. And honestly, actually, that's kind of a lie. I am still anxious about certain things, but I tend to avoid those things, like flying on airplanes. But I used to be a very anxious person, and I don't think I've ever talked about that, but the craft actually really did help me a lot. I think the most powerful way I found to manage it was with meditation. But I did have a tea charm that I did with a lavender, lemon, and chamomile tea. And I'll look through my papers and see if I can find it in my Book of Shadows, and I'll add it in the description down below. I think I also had a crystal or something. It's a very, very basic spell, but it's one of the first ones I ever wrote, and it just really brought a lot of peace to my moment. And if I was in the midst of a panic attack, it usually could pull me out of it. So yeah, I did use the craft to help manage it, and I think that was a good question, and I'm glad that you asked it. I hope that helps some of you. What are some things that you do to help with spiritual burnout when you've lost that magical feeling? This is a question I get asked a lot, and honestly, I think my best answer would be to just kind of go back to the basics and start really, really small. Don't be strict with how you need to practice or how much you must do in order to feel like you're actually practicing magic or the craft, and do something that you want to do. Don't ever force anything. You know, personally, when I'm feeling a little more burnt out magically, I'll go back and do the things that I really want to do. This summer, I felt pretty burnt out magically and just in general, and I did a lot of kitchen magic. That's pretty much what I did for the majority of the summer, and that was the majority of my practice, because that was the one place that I still felt really inspired to create in. And so I think just trying to go back to those basics, the space that feels really comfortable and safe and inspiring to you. Spiritual burnout is a real thing, and it's pretty common, and I definitely get it a couple times a year. But usually when I do, I go back to the basics, and once I find my rhythm again, I am able to get back into the full swing of things. And you know, magic really it isn't something that you should force. It's something that you need to feel really good about while you're practicing. And if you're not, that's okay. Just take some time and do what you need to do to get back to it. Will you ever be doing a series type thing, teaching the basics that you have learned about herbalism? I would really love to. I want to know what you guys think about that. I would really love to share more about herbalism and teach some more about it, some basics starting out and all those other things. I am still in school, and I would still like to have a more rounded understanding of herbalism before I start doing full-fledged teachings on it. I would really like to one day share some more of the basics and things with you all. There are certainly really great courses online, but they do tend to be expensive, so I would like to share what I can. And for those of you that would like it, if you want to let me know how you'd feel about that. Have you thought of doing a video or video series about most common herbs and their correspondences for witchcraft? Yes, I would like to. I do intend to, in the next witchcraft series that I want to work on, kind of deep dive into some of my favorite herbs and some herbs that I'd recommend, and do some individual herbal profiles as well. But I would also like to preface this by saying I had a lot of questions asking what my favorite herbs were, top 5 herbs or top 10 herbs I'd recommend to beginners. And honestly, the only reason I haven't made a video like that, because I would imagine it's one that would do pretty well and people would like, is because I do have a global audience here, and I know a significant amount of you would not be able to get your hands on all the herbs that I would recommend. I am a Western practitioner. I work in the United States. I have used pretty much my whole life plants that were native to Virginia, and those are not plants that are native throughout the world. I'm now in a very different place, and I have a whole new selection of plants that I'm very interested to begin working with, but my only holdup, I suppose, my roundabout point to this, my only holdup with making a video or videos like this is that I'm not going to be able to touch on the plants that are really necessarily going to be good for your practice. I personally believe, as a green witch, and if you are a practicing green witch, that it's essential to work with what is native in your area. And to be in tune with the energies of where you are, you have to work in the ways that your area of the world sings, if that makes any sense. And, you know, if you are somebody who lives in the tropics, working with lavender, I suppose, may not be exactly what fits your needs. There's a significant difference between where I live and somebody who's right on the equator or anywhere all over. The earth is so incredibly different, and the plants that we have at our fingertips are so incredibly different. So the dog is drinking water. So, well, yes, I would like to do a series on this, and I do believe that I will. I also think that it's really important to talk about and express that magic, especially herbal-based magic, should really come from the place you're living in. A lot of you aren't going to be able to get the herbs that I use, and that's okay. You can just, you know, shift it around and use what you have on hand. That's really kind of the beauty of it, is it's something that should be really personal. So, yes, I will probably make some videos on this, but I also want to wait until I can make videos explaining how to discover the use of the herbs in the areas in which you live. What is a typical day/week for you? Does working for yourself make it easier or harder to keep a regular schedule? Does having no 9 to 5 make it easier to keep creativity flowing? Thank you. All right. Honestly, it varies a lot. A typical day, week for me either looks like I wake up, pull my laptop onto my lap, begin working, and don't stop working until I literally am going to sleep. Or it could also look like I wake up, go outside, spend some time connecting with the earth, and then I get to work and, you know, jump around between crafting and working and crafting and working. It really honestly depends on how much I have to get done or how I'm feeling, or a lot. I would say it is only occasionally harder to keep a regular schedule. My schedule is terrible. I am a workaholic. I absolutely adore doing only working things. I have a problem. For me, it is, I suppose, hard to keep a normal human schedule, but I do tend to stick to a pretty strict working schedule. And, you know, honestly, I would probably say that I had better creative flow when I had a 9 to 5 or regular type jobs, because I had all this very specific time that was somebody else's time, and then I got to come home and it was just my time. And now, where I don't really have a defined beginning or end, I guess come over here then. Now that I don't really have a defined beginning or end, I do struggle a little bit with keeping creative flows all the time. Oh, big baby. What benefits did magic bring you spiritually or personally that you didn't expect when you first started your path? Honestly, I mean, magic has brought me everything in my life. It's given me my job, it's given me this adventure, and it gave me a lot of purpose. It's solely because of magic that I am living my life the way that I always had dreamed that I would. On that note, I hope you guys are doing well, and thank you so much for watching this late Q&A. I'll see you guys soon, and yeah, okay, bye. Oh, timing.